So we've been doing a series. I mean, it's been a couple of webinars that we've been doing over the last couple of months. I think I have done. I'm sure there's a slide in here that talks about the ones that I have we've been able to do. So I know we started in the month of April with something on corporate social responsibility. And I know in the month of May, we did something on asset management. And last month, we did something on compliance management. I believe all these videos are all on YouTube. All the recordings, actually, sorry, are all on YouTube. So Maureen, who works with me, I'm sure will drop the link to the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to get some of these things that we have that we did um, in the past. But today we're talking about corporate governance. Next week, we'll be looking at some, next month, sorry, we'll be looking at something on facility management. I'm sure the date might change because I think I'm traveling around that period, but we'll see. And then, of course, in the month of September, a lot of people have been looking forward to that one, which is on climate change, but we'll see. I'll probably also have like some kind of guest speaker on that particular call for climate change that we'll be doing in the month of September. All right. So once again, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Today we're talking about corporate governance, and this is a big conversation everywhere. I mean, everywhere where you say corporate governance, everybody's worried: are we doing it well? Are we doing it right? The key thing for me is that for corporate governance, um, is that most people don't even realize that there is a standard for it. Most people don't even realize at all that there is an ISO standard for corporate governance. Most people do corporate governance, should I say, however it is that they think it should be done. So when I tell organizations that there is a standard for corporate governance, just like there's a standard for risk management, there's a standard for compliance, and some of things people don't realize that it's for real. There are standards for all these things. So there's a standard for corporate governance attested. It's not a set of requirements, but it's got a couple should statements, right? That say that you should do this, and then you can get an external entity like ourselves to come in to review you to find out how well you're doing or how well you have met the requirements of that particular standard. A lot of organizations don't realize this. They don't realize that indeed there is an ISO and adopt as part of how they drive corporate governance in their own organization. So it's my pleasure to be here. My name is Orlando. I work for A4S, um, and I will be taking this particular session. I've been involved with all sorts of work, all sorts of projects, and all sorts of standards in my 20 plus years of work. And once again, it's my pleasure to be here. I will be driving this session, just like I've been driving or facilitating all the other sessions that we've had prior to now. Our company is A4S. That's what we are. We're an independent audit assurance organization when it comes to standards, and we also provide quite a bit of advisory and assessment when it comes to international best practice of various types. So that's who we are. That's what we do, and yeah, our mission is to just make sure that we add value to you. So this interaction that we have, we hope that it will be valuable to you. And yeah, I mean the organization in itself is driven by. I mean, in our line of work, we don't have a choice but to be competent, and we're not just competent by degrees or qualification. Um, uh, yeah, we're competent by leadership. Oh, sorry, we add value by leadership, innovation. We're competent based on experience, real life experience that we've had in the past. We try as much as possible to be professionals, and yeah, excellent delivery with the work that we do. So once again, thank you very much for being here. So this is one of the major documents when it comes to corporate governance. So everywhere people are talking about corporate governance, this is key. Everybody will say, "Oh, every country's got some form of government that looks like this one." So, we'll find how things should be run. This is a key dot. How companies, legal entities, registered entities in a particular country, especially in Nigeria now, how we should run is tied to this document. So nobody who is doing corporate go or everybody is probably a better way for me to put it. Everybody that is doing corporate governance, they are all going to adopt, refer to this particular document as much as humanly possible. So that's key. Ghana has got because we operate primarily in two locations. Yeah, so it's like one of our legs is in Nigeria, the other leg is in Ghana. So we operate in both locations. So we're always very mindful of everything that's got to do with Ghana. So Ghana's got its own equivalent, the Ghana Companies Act, the 2019 version. So once again, in Ghana, everybody who is doing anything that has got to do with corporate governance has got to take this into consideration. You can't be discussing how a company should be run, due diligence, how to meet the requirements, legal, regulatory compliance, how to ensure that organizations are sustainable into the future out looking at the another location where we work is in Kenya, and also looked at the Kenyan version. So you will call in one thing or the other. I wish I had the lawyers call because this is very useful and applicable to them, the company secretaries, and it's important that you take this into consideration. And even risk compliance type people who are all involved or interested in corporate governance, important that you take this into consideration. Okay. This entity is in Nigeria. I'm sure Ghana's got like an equivalent type entity. And they're great organization. I'm not even a member. I just have quite a bit of their books and their resources and the various things. And I think I've attended one of their programs. But it's the Society for Corporate Governance in Nigeria, and they're very big on it. That's what they do, programs and things for doing an advert for them on this particular call. Well, yeah, I like the materials of some where I am seated, and they're very good with championing, pushing, and being they got some resources that you, if you read to this, lean on their resources. I've got 2 or 3 of their books. I'm not sure they exist in soft copy, but they've got some really good books around boards and things like that. Another organization that is that you find loads of resources and materials from is OECD, and they're very big on corporate. You can see they've even just revamped some of the documentation that they have, so you can see corporate governance. You can also see corporate governance fact book and corporate state-owned enterprises. So these are very useful resources, and you can download some of them and further educate yourself from Kenya on the call, or you're in Ghana, or you're from Cameroon, or any of those places. It's one to do it from a local perspective. It's something else for you to look at an international approach to corporate governance, and that is what OECD is for. they cannot, as part of your learning or you're getting, make sure that you also take into consideration the international rules, policy, community, importance of corporate governance and the first instance, right? Another one, Institute of Directors. I've also found them to be very useful, very applicable. They have all sorts of things behind the idea behind this program is not it's not to be uh, it's not to board of corporate governance. I'm sure there are many places where you used to speak about corporate governance generally, but also to look at it specifically with regards to the ISO standard. So, but I like this. I mean, so here it says corporate governance defined, described from different perspectives or from different people. But I like that portion that says it describes the processes, structures, and mechanisms that influence the control and the direction of corporations or organizations. That's a good one, a bit mouthful. Uh, Describes the processes, structures, and mechanisms that influence the control and the direction of corporations. So that's not bad in terms of definition. Organization is governed appropriately to ensure that it exists as today and will also exist even into the future. And everywhere you see where people are talking about corporate governance, they will always tie it back to some report that was done by Cadbury on corporate governance a long time ago, and Cadbury organization as or I think that time was not even done, was just done by, yeah, it was done by Cadbury and the owners or people, and they came up with it. I think, right, the makers of pizza and chocolates and things like that. So they came up with like the first formal document, global document when it comes to corporate governance. So everywhere where you go for corporate governance session, people will always started taking corporate governance into keen consideration. Once again, you can see OECD in there. So yeah, you can. History is good. Once again, I'm not a great lover of history, but history is very good. It's useful to be able to tie things back to maybe where they originated and when they originated, and what has been the direction till date. Also, this is not a training class. We cannot conclude. We cannot train. Most people will attend a training class for corporate governance that will last 2 days or 3 days. IOD does some of those things. We focus primarily on the ISO standard 37,000 standard for corporate governance. Another one, I've also experienced this because I had to do some work in the past. So South African and Southern African companies refer to this document a lot. It's called the King Report on Corporate Governance. So you will find updated versions of it. There's even a nice one pager. There's a summary version of the whole thing. But companies who are either listed in South Africa, doing business in South Africa, who have a branch in South Africa, they're guided a lot by this particular document. So it's also another one that you might want to have a good look at as come up with your corporate governance framework specifically for your own organization. All right. So the other thing here is, I mean, and this is a big conversation everywhere. I was still in a meeting last week, and this was a big, and the person was actually talking about corporate governance, and I just was saying about corporate governance. I even while listening to him, because he was speaking about corporate governance from the companies that he has started, founded, and he has now become the chairman, or he joined one or two people, but he's the chairman of those entities. And while he was speaking and I was listening to him, I felt that he was mixing too much of what is management's responsibility with the responsibility of the board. Because when you talk about corporate governance, it's primarily about one thing. It's primarily about the board, and it starts from the board and dovetails to executive management. And the more the person spoke about strategy, performance, and a lot of those things, it was really speaking about, it was his conversation was more these things in place, putting these things in place rather than being at the board where you're accountable for those things, but you're not necessarily responsible for them. And I know some of the people on the call, all of you, some of them are, or some of you, sorry, are all ISO experts, and all you've heard of the RACI matrix, and I prefer even the RASCI matrix, the one that says that who is responsible, who is accountable, who are those who support the responsible person, who are those that are consulted for input, and who are those that outputs go out to as information. So the key thing here is who is accountable if the organization off, and who responsible. Two different things. Accountability for the organization is the board. The board and the board themselves, they represent the shareholders of the organization, also the alpha and the omega and the management. But for public quoted companies, they're the shareholders. Then you have the board, who in themselves are a representation or representatives of the shareholders, and then you have executive management is real. So in trying to differentiate responsibility versus accountability, the board versus executive, right? Like ultimate accountability. And I like to use also, so I mean, I remember something along those lines when Lloyd's TSB in the UK was having all sorts of challenges with IT failure. I was looking for a picture to add to these slides, and when they had to go to Parliament, it was the chairman and the CEO who went to Parliament, and the first person that he told that he was going to lose all his bonuses and all that was the chairman of the board. So ultimate accountability, if something goes wrong, it belongs to the board. Ultimate accountability, but the core responsibility to run the organization, to execute the strategy, the board will approve things. And for some of you who do things like Prince 2, you will see every time they were talking about the project board, you will always see them use the word. They're not even full-time people in most organizations. The board usually have all your non-executive board members, and they only come in except for a few organizations. There's an organization we're doing some work with, because the board members get like it's a government institution. The board members get like $1 million every day they come into the building. So they kind of structure it in such a way that they come into the building like twice every month, so that each of them can get 2 million naira. And at the end of the year, just by the board sitting allowance alone would make up 24 million. So they put themselves in subcommittees and ensure that they come to the building, even if it's just spend an hour. That's not a well-structured or properly run organization. For most people and for most organizations, the board members come in once every quarter. They spend half a day, full day, something along those lines, and that's it really. So it's important that you take this into consideration. That you plan, that you're on the call and you plan to do corporate governance in your life, in your career, as part of what it is that you do. You have to be able to draw a clear line of delineation between who exactly who makes up the board, and they are responsible as it is. So that's why I put that slide. Before I go into the standard, I put this other slide in here. These are just other considerations, right? So considerations when you have to have a board chairman, who is fit to be the board chairman, what must he know, what must he or she actually, what must they have to become a board chairman. Could be he, could be she. It doesn't matter. We don't use chairman. It's just chairman, right? It's a role. So the role specifies what is their role, skill, ability. Somebody said the job of the board is to keep executive management, to keep them honest, and that might be true to an extent. Their job is to keep the executive management honest in their dealings. So, what can the chairman do? Or what can the chairman do? What can the chairman not do? Who can be a chairman? Who cannot be might not be a chairman? If this was a full training of corporate governance, we'll deal with some of these things. Also, board leadership, governance, and one big challenge everywhere is always the compensation for board members. So, how do you determine what is an appropriate compensation for the board members? Is also very important. In Nigeria, everybody wants Ibukun Awosika to be their board chairman. So there must be a reason why people want that. They want a certain person to be their board chairman, but what also will be the compensation. And that in itself is always very tricky because if you're a big organization, even the government in a lot of countries also intervene when it comes to what can be paid out as compensation to board members and things like that. Also further to that, how do you make sure that they're both effective and efficient? I know a lot of people don't use the word efficient tied to boards, but you also have some very inefficient boards. They don't meet regularly. When they meet, they spend half of the time gisting and eating. I've been in such meetings where I had to do a presentation or something like that, and half of the time is just spent on what I almost call irrelevant things and out and to go to the right people. So there's some boards that, effective versus efficient means that effective is that they're doing the delivering results. Efficient means that they're delivering the results in the fastest and the quickest way and means possible. So some boards are not effective and they're not even efficient. So that's important. And then of course there's a big role, number 5. When I started looking deeply into corporate governance, either for our own organization and even some of our clients, is when I started seeing the role of the company secretary, the importance of such a role. I know a lot of people always say that only a lawyer can be company secretary. That's not true. You don't have to be a lawyer to be the company secretary. So it might be advantageous, but yeah, you don't necessarily have to be. I've seen some organizations that the company secretary, it's just that they have to deal with a lot of legal things. So people just feel that it's safer that the company secretary should be a lawyer, but it's not necessary. Another one here is definitely the meetings and the agenda. Board meetings. I've seen some organizations where the board meetings take 12, 13 hours. Like they start at 9 o'clock in the morning, at night they're still there. I usually would ask her, like, are you about to acquire your competitor or something? Why do you have to stay this long? Some of those meetings, they're not properly rehearsed. They bring the things that should be discussed in subcommittees, they bring them to the main, and that just makes everything too long. Also, you have to look at the frequency. Most people try to do the normal committee and things like that. But of course, most people have only the annual general meeting. And what will be the constraint of the annual general meeting? When should it hold? How do we drive that whole thing? It's just to bring them and we give them souvenirs for coming and things like that. So that's also key. Performance evaluation, and even when it comes to the tenure of the board members. So how long should they be there? What have you adopted? Every 1 year, every 2 years, every 3 years? And some industries even have very clear specifications for how long the board members should be there. And how do you even evaluate the board? Actually, the board is effective, and everybody's staring at me. I'm like, well, measuring the effectiveness, the KPIs for measuring that, and which is in a sense, that's like KPIs for measuring if corporate governance is really working in the organization. So there's also due diligence, board members, their interest, you can't have board members that every loan in the organization, and I always say, if you go to most banks, what's the biggest problem? The biggest problems is the board members beyond a certain limit to a particular sector, to a particular person, get loans and things like that, loans out. Branch managers don't do these things. These things, not even MDs do these things. These things usually is coming from the board. And then they already know A should not be given this loan, and then Mr. A is giving that loan. Somebody is interest is involved and over again. So interest in that they can influence procurement. So everybody will go and look for who is on the board. Let's go and speak to them so that they can help influence that who would win this particular bid or this particular thing. And once again, that's not appropriate where they call board members, they meant within the organization. And of course, you also do due diligence. A guy has been the police, and then how is it that he gets to become a board member of a financial institution? How do these things happen? So then of course there are some very tricky issues, the role of board members versus the shareholders. What about in cases where they're the same? Of course, majority shareholders want a say, they want to sit at the board, whether they're competent or to have that seat or capable of having that seat or otherwise. They also are interested in that. And of course, all the other things around executive directors, non-executive directors, and then the concept of independent directors or independent board members. So if this was a full training that we're spending a whole day or something like that, we will pretty much almost spend like an hour on each of these areas. This small this one will literally be broken into 2 days worth of work with content, with different facilitators and things like that. Just looking at the various instances, the various scenarios where and how all these things play out. But this is the one webinar, so we can't go into the details of everything here. And usually when it comes to things like this, not only one person even does this alone, so they'll bring in other people, and everybody brings their own experience, either being a part of a board or reviewing a board or helping to set up a board for a certain organization and things like that. So I felt it was very important that we speak about this, that the standard in itself doesn't spell it out exactly like this, at least not everything. And most standards need to be supported with one thing or the other. Nevertheless, these are 12 important considerations or concepts when you're thinking about corporate governance for your own organization. All right, let me move straight into the standard, right? So this standard does exist, has existed for a bit. They've had to, rework it over and over again to be able to arrive at this version of the standard. And it's a guidance document. So, in ISO standards, we have some things that are called requirements document. This is not a requirements document. It is a, and I'll get to the set people are dropping there, and I'll go into the chat room and I'll speak to some of these things. And yeah, let me just do this because I'm worried about time and I like to actually always finish on time. So it does exist, and once again I do think that all organizations should adopt this, right? And we'll talk about the dashboard later, because this is also something I've seen in some organizations where they actually have a corporate governance dashboard. Most of them have like some kind of GRC type system, or some people are going to have a board meeting or board type a system where minutes of meeting and certain KPIs they have them, and then they will show a graph, they will show a chart to say this is where we are, this is what we have done, this is what is left to be done, and things like that. So but I have another one somewhere in there. Once again, let me jump straight into this. So it's a standard pretty much. It's an international standard that just looks like the minimum anybody should put in place. That's what it really looks like. It looks at the minimum anybody should put in place for their own organization, so that your organization will behave ethically and responsibly. So ethics is a big portion uh, of corporate governance. You've got to think about, are you ethical in your approach? I think I have one of my friends on the call. He was was taking us through was taking us through a couple of things earlier in the year when we're talking about CSR, ESG, SDG, and even things like EDI, equity, diversity and inclusion. There's a lot that is involved. So purpose and sustainability, and people need to be able to trust the organization, that the organization is well run. You provide services to people. People need to be able to trust that the organization is appropriately run. And of course, these things also have a direct link to business performance. And globally now, environment, social, and governance is a big deal. And you can't say that you're meeting environment, social, and governance without you putting something like this in place appropriately. So yeah, and you can see at the bottom it says globally accepted. So you can go somewhere now and say, oh, we are putting CAMA, but the people don't know what is CAMA, or the Companies Act of Ghana, but they don't know what that is. But ISO 37000 is global, just like everything that is ISO. And any organization that has put this in place and has taken this into keen consideration will be able to show that and they have, it's also very important that you have an independent entity that looks at it, because everybody says that we've done it. Just like everything that is ISO, right? Everything that's like a standard or like some kind of best practice. The people always say that we've done it, but they might not have done it. So yeah, this is also very important. So it's not a big document. It's just a 20-something, like a 30-something page document. So, but it's applicable to everybody, and it's got its requirements. Let me move straight into some of the things that are here. So once again, it sets out the guidance for helping your organization be sure that it's governed appropriately, and this is end to end, so that that the organization, that you're not fraudulent, that you're meeting every kind of environmental, social, and governance requirements. That it also aligns to the Sustainable Development Goals. It actually has that clearly stated in there that every organization should meet SDG appropriately, and that your stakeholders are happy. And big stakeholders is a big conversation, because when we say stakeholders, we have to speak about both the internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders. I mean, risk management, compliance, legal, regulatory type things are all the subsumed somewhere inside of this whole thing. So one of the key things that it has is that it's got this wheel, and I think you can see it on my screen, and it's broken like into parts, four parts, right? So it talks about the outcomes of great governance, so responsible stewardship, effective performance, and ethical behavior. It calls those three things the outcomes, and then it looks at the primary governance principle in itself, which is purpose, right? And then it looks at the foundational ones, and then value generation, strategy, accountability, and oversight, and then it further looks at the ones that it calls represented here, the governance outcomes in the outermost layer. Okay, the governance outcome. Everybody can hear me. The governance, this for your organization, what are the outcomes? Can you really demonstrate that you met these three outcomes? Responsible stewardship of the resources that are that have been committed into your hands, effective performance of the organization, and ethical behavior outcomes. And then it talks about the primary governance principle, which it calls purpose. And then it looks at the foundational governance principle, how value is being generated, the concept of the principle of accountability, strategy in itself. Once again, the strategy, you have to break it down into strategy formulation and strategy execution versus oversight. And then it looks at the enabling principle. So that's pretty much, and I tried to summarize the whole standard on this page. So the whole standard is pretty much on this single page. It's got some terms and definitions, governance and organization, and it talks about the outcomes and things like that, roles. and then it looks at these things one by one. It talks about the governance body, who should make up the composition of the governance body, the structure of the governance body, and their competence. It talks about the competence of the people who make it to other people's boards, or who make it to the boards of their own organization. Because you're the owner, you're the one who started the organization, does not mean that you even qualify or should be on the board. Board is a different thing entirely. And because you're the owner does not, and the owner and the founder does not necessarily mean you're going to be the chairman of the board. So you might not be the best person. And that happens for a lot of organizations. In fact, they recommend a lot of times that, you know, because you're the founder does not mean that you should be the chair of the board. You might have a place in there, but needs to have its own level of independence and objectivity, and you being the owner of the founder might not be. Right. So once again, the outcomes of the effective performance, responsible stewardship, and ethical behavior. And then we'll look at the governance principles, and then you can see at the bottom here, governance tools and resources, and it talks about sustainable practices. So it mentions the SDG goals, and I think I know that I did ISO 26000 some months ago on SDG, and yeah, we'll share the link for that. The UN Global Impact, ISO 14000. So we did our own webinar some months ago on ISO 26000 in itself, and other things like GRI, so which is important to people who are doing SDG, who are doing ESG, global reporting initiatives and things like that. So it does specify very clearly these things. So if you're also doing corporate governance, you can't ignore any of these things as it is. So I will breeze through this very quickly. These are the terms and the definitions as captured in the standard in itself. So the standard has got all these terminologies, and that's something that you have to worry about. I've seen organizations where, you know, their corporate governance framework is badly written. They just pick stuff from the internet, or somebody has just taken something that he used and he or she used in their former, and they just brought another organization, and it's not fit for purpose. They haven't aligned to, it's like risk management framework, right? So we'll tell most people that, you know what, you need to take COSO into consideration, you need to take ISO 31000, and there's some slight differences even when it comes to I'll still review something. Somebody says, oh, it's impact for us. Somebody says it's consequence for us, right? So it needs to be clearly captured. Which of those terminologies are you going to use throughout the entire documentation of the framework? And then you put a caveat somewhere that when we say impact, it means this. And then you use impact throughout. You don't read one page, it says impact, you read another page, it says effect, you read another page, it says consequence. And then you just find out that, you know, the whole thing is just everywhere. So it's got some definitions in there. And these are some of the things, or not some, this is everything that it defines in there. So this is everything about 26 different terminologies that are captured in there, and it gives its own definition for what is the governance of organization, what the meaning of a governance framework, the meaning of risk appetite, the meaning of due diligence, and things like that. So that's what this whole page is about, the terms and the definitions. Once again, within the standard, it captures all this, the context of the standard in itself. So it talks about the need for guidance, and for you to adopt a guidance document like this. And it also mentions quite a bit around how organizations should be governed in alignment to some of those things that we talked about, in alignment to SDG, in alignment to the compliance requirements of the organization, in alignment to the legal and regulatory environment. So you see some organizations, I can remember some that I was looking at, whether it was UBA, that I was looking at something on their website, and I was like, wow, the compliance framework of this organization is going to be very, very, very deep, because they've got to comply almost in how many, maybe 20, 30 different countries globally. And these are not just African countries. Some of them are even outside of Africa. And that's a tough one. So sometimes when people say that, oh, we're going to exist outside of Nigeria, we're going to be here, we're going to be there, sometimes you're looking at them like, I hope you understand the volume of regulatory requirements you're going to have to deal with in trying to do your business in multiple jurisdictions as it is. He also talks about the thread of governance. So like a workflow for governance, like, where does it start? Where does it end? Who are all the entities that are involved? Authorizations, approval, and things like that. So it calls it the thread of governance, but I would rather just call it the workflow for governance in itself. And of course, it also tries to draw that line between what is governance versus what is management, and how can the governance of an organization ensure that it meets the requirements of all its stakeholders. I was the government institution earlier this week, and what they said was that they have all these human rights groups, whether entities with people for disability of one type or the other, and things like that. And all of them will come to their gates and they'll come to make a lot of noise, that they should please show them their books. How many people with disability have they hired? And they were telling me that they never even thought about those things at all. That it wasn't even a consideration that, wow, we really need to think about how we're meeting some of these things. So once again, that's where things like ESG comes in. Environment. I've got people on this call that I know that are environmental experts, and they will talk about use of water, use of certain kind of bulbs, energy saving, and all sorts of alternatives. The last time now when you go to shops in the UK, I get very annoyed because now you're Sainsbury's just because you want to buy something, because now they don't give plastic bags, you have to pay for it. The number of times that I had to pay the last time I was there, I was like, because I just won't leave my house thinking that I need to take a plastic bag in my pockets to buy groceries when I'm going back. So yeah, how do you do all this? So all these are key elements. Once again, you see that if you subject the framework that most organizations have to things like this, it will fall short. And that's the advantage of adopting a standard. The standard is very clear. Standard is very, should I say, definite in terms of what they expect you to do, whether it's a shall requirement or is a should requirement in terms of what you should do. And the idea is that you're building a framework, building a set of processes, you're aligning to it. Let me move on very quickly. He also talks about the governing body, the composition and the structure of the governing body, and then the competence of the governing body. This is also critical. Who should be in the governing body? How do we differentiate between those that should be there and the people in the executive management? What are the skills, the competence, the capabilities that people should have before they can make it up to the board? Can anybody just make it up to the board of an organization? Can anybody just get there? I don't think so. It's important that you think about who's the best person that can that is best fit, so to speak, to get on the board of your own organization as it is, and all sorts of due diligence that you need to do. Now, most people, when they hear due diligence, they're only thinking about due diligence from the perspective of maybe fraud or something along those lines. But it's not just fraud. There's due diligence with regards to competence, right? You put board members, the people are talking about mergers, acquisition, some areas that they need that board member to contribute, and the board member has nothing to say, or they're doing something whereby they need the board member to intervene, and the board member is completely clueless about how to manage or what to contribute. Some people have subcommittees, but in the committee pretty much don't understand or know anything. So it's important that it's not only that you have people, but you have competent people. All right. So once again, we've talked about these three things. This is one of the ways, if I was auditing an organization that says we've put in corporate governance, this is one of the ways by which I will review them. I will review them relative to these three things. How do I judge that the organization and the board that they perform effectively, that they're responsible stewards? The stewardship reminds me of when they say some people have been given 5 talents and 3 talents and 1 talent, and then what did they do with each of the talents that they've been given? And some people will get double return on investment, and some people might just hide the talent, and they might not be great stewards of the resources that have been committed into their hands. So this is also very applicable here. Are you using both the human, the financial, the environmental, and even equipment? Every time I go to an organization, you look at some of their systems and you see that they underutilize their systems, they underutilize their ERP, they underutilize their GRC platform, they underutilize many things in the organization. And finally, it's around ethics. And I know it's very tough to say that, for organizations to boldly say that they're ethical, but all of us are encouraged to keep improving when it comes to ethics, so to speak. So it calls these 3 things, it calls them the key elements of the framework, but they are also the outcomes for governance that you can prove indeed that that your organization and the governance, both the organization and the governance of the organization have these 3 outcomes. So this is tough. Effective performance is just like when you talk about performance management to people, and people think that performance management only means human performance, or they tell them that there's process performance, but there's the overall performance of the organization, which is looking at people performance, system performance, process performance especially. And I think that process performance is the most important because everything is a process. Even governance in itself is a process. Strategy is a process. Performance management in itself is a process. But yeah, let me leave it at that. So at that. Once again, very quickly, it talks about these 11 principles. It talks about these 11 principles. It calls number 1, the primary principle. It calls number 2, 3, and 4, the foundational principles, and it calls the remaining, it calls them enabling principles. So the purpose of the organization from all perspectives. So you have to look at that place that says all perspectives. And then the value model. So I was still reviewing the business model canvas for an organization yesterday. So that's key. And then, of course, strategy, oversight, accountability, stakeholder management, leadership, data and decisions. A lot of people will fall flat on their face when they get to number 8. It talks about decisions that you're making based on data, decisions that you're making forward by data. And of course, risk is key. Who's the CRO? What is the adopted risk management framework? Social responsibility and your CSR initiatives as an organization and how you're contributing towards SDG and your entire ESG. And also look at the last one, everybody. It calls it viability and performance over time, not just momentarily, but over time, viability and performance over time. These are the core. So if we're reviewing an organization, once again, we're going to have to review them relative to the dictates of these 11 things. And the 11 things are very clear. These are the expectations. This is what you should have done. And it's not just for you to say, write it that we're doing these things. That's why you call an independent auditor like myself, because then I'll come to also review. It's not just that you're saying you're doing them, but what is the evidence that you're doing them? It's not enough to say I'm doing these things, but what is the actual evidence that you're doing them? So, and each of the principles, they've even broken it down into, all of them have like some kind of explanation of how you have adopted the principle. There's some kind of rationale behind each of them, the key aspects of the practices. So we will review the organization relative to all the practices. And there are about 100, almost 200 different requirements in a sense, not requirements, but let me call them expectations from the standard. And we need evidence that you've met those things. And even in some of the principles, it gives us something called the dilemma examples. Like, these are the touch points here, or these are the touch points or the areas that are questionable when it comes to this principle. So how have you addressed this principle, both in your documentation and in reality? So yeah, let me quickly go through them because of time, the purpose of the organization, the ultimate value to the organization intends to generate to the specified stakeholders. And of course, for most people, their strategy will address this. So expect the framework that you have in the organization in itself. Of this whole thing, you find of you. So it's not. Once again, there's something business model or the strategy map or balance scorecard. Which of those things that you decided to adopt when it comes to how value is being created? And then you can see here the concept of innovation and collaboration, your stakeholder comes into play. So you can see that this standard really does take a holistic view of the real holistic view of corporate governance in itself. So we will review the organization value generation, once again, your strategy. And that's what makes people find out that they don't even have an updated strategy. The strategy is too old, it's not effective, it's not being measured. And of course, the biggest thing that everybody's got with strategy is that they all will go into some nice hotel, some nice place. And I like to go to those places too. We'll go to Cape Town and have a nice strategy session, Seychelles, and we come back with a nice document and all that. But the problem is the execution of the strategy. Like Professor Kaplan and Professor Noddy, when they wrote a balance scorecard, the last installment of the 5 books is called the Execution Premium. That's the last from Kaplan and Norton. And they are the ones who have written the most extensive document when it comes to strategy in the world. And the last one says that people have great strategy, but they have poor execution. And that happens to accountability, as I mentioned this earlier. Ultimately, the board is accountable for the organization and things like trust, things like ethics, things like meeting all sorts of requirements, whether financial disclosure, whether things that are got to do with compliance, or even things that have to do with SDG and ESG. Accountability is important, and the board of the organization will be able to demonstrate that indeed they have full accountability when it comes to these things. Also, the concept of oversight, that they need to know control when I still establish organization, and they say, oh, internal audit control. It's kind of, you can't be a big telco provider and you will say that for you they're the same. I mean, that doesn't even make any sense, so to speak. So that there's an effective internal control system and even an effective internal system as effect for the organization. Internal audit is intermittent, it's very planned, probably review a process or review a department, maybe once or twice type thing. It's like quality control versus the last ones here, meeting the requirement. Once again, every time I use the word stakeholder, and in some of the ISO standards, they use the word interested parties. But there are 2 groups and 2 categories. And once again, people forget that. The challenge is that governance sometimes looks outside and does not look inside. But they also have internal stakeholders, right? The staff of the organization, they're major when it comes to internal stakeholders. And then you also now have to look outside. I know the tendency when it comes to this particular standard is to focus more on the outside, that, the regulator, the legal entities, and things like that. But you also do have internal stakeholders. And part of this whole thing, part of this entire thing that we're looking at is how you're meeting the requirements of both your internal and external stakeholders. Leadership is key. Leadership, I mean, what I say to people all the time is that leadership is not a speech. Leadership is not a speech. Leadership is not a leadership is not a conversation. People say leadership, and then they will have a speech like Martin Luther King or something like that. But that's not what leadership is. Leadership is your ability to be able to drive people to achieve specific results. It's not what people say that, oh, I'm a leader. You demonstrate leadership by the results that you're able to achieve. It's not a speech. It's not what somebody say, oh, I'm a leader. No, that's not what it is. It's the result, how you were able to drive people working in an organization to meet corporate objectives. Without that, you're not really a leader. And that's why most people who are consultants and individuals, they struggle when it comes to positions of leadership. They really do struggle. Once again, the leadership of the organization and how they're able to meet the right results. Most people fail here, I like what's that thing the Americans say, in God we trust. There's a book like that. It says in data we trust. Americans say that in God we trust. Let a person bring data and check it out. It says we trust, your decisions are meant to be data driven. In many methodologies, even in the MOR methodology, it talks about data driven decisions. In ISO 31000, it talks about data driven decisions that you have business intelligence. So most people don't even have the tools, they don't have the platforms, they can't synthesize data over a period of time. So it's about data driven decisions. That's important, that's essential. Risk is key. So COSO, all of us should go back, adopt COSO and ISO 31000, look at who is our chief risk officer. And the big challenge here for most organizations is that they're not doing risk management. 9 out of 10 organizations don't do risk management. What they do is issue management. I tell my clients all the time in out of the methodology is even viable, that were viable into the future. So those are the 11 of them. As I said, normally this is like a 3-4 day type training program. We can't cover everything at the level of detail that we need to cover it. I just wanted, for me, is to raise the awareness for this kind of thing. Yeah, I encourage our organizations, whether with us, without us, on your own, however you do it, that you should adopt the standard in itself. And I think I've been able to point in the right direction. One of the things we'll also do is that we will share a link with you. There's a foundation course that we have. We'll get you to take the foundation course for free if you've attended this particular course, and you'll be able to generate your certificate, and it's an accredited certificate. So once again, yeah, okay, before I finish, there's some supporting ones. So this is a big one. I've done this for a couple of organizations, this anti-bribery management system. We'll also hold a webinar specifically tied to this at some point in time. This is a supporting standard. So you can see that this one, corporate governance, is 37000, but this one for anti-bribery is 37001. So that's one. And we will look at this at some point in time. This is another one, which is also a supporting document, which is the whistleblowing. And this is also very essential. And there's nobody who will say that they're doing these things that will not need to worry about whistleblowing and ensuring that they have a whistleblowing policy in the organization and it's effective. Because I see a lot of people sometimes have these policies, but these policies in themselves are not effective, right? So that's it. And I mentioned dashboard at the beginning. This is like a dashboard for corporate governance. Your organization has to think about how do you bring data from various sources to build some kind of dashboard that shows you the performance of corporate governance in your organization, the dashboard reporting for the performance of corporate governance in your own organization. This is also key, it's essential, and I'll tell you that 9 out of 10 organizations, if not way more, are not even thinking about this kind of thing. It's almost like governance, the board, they're on their own and they're gods unto themselves, but we also need to measure the board in terms of their effectiveness. Internal auditors need to do that. Risk people need to point out if there's a risk with the board, because most organizations, the board can literally ruin the entire organization in itself. There's also the attestation of compliance. So that's what the certificate is. So we can come review an organization tied to this is an attestation of compliance relative to this particular standard in itself. I mean, the big thing that we do is training and audit. So that's what we do, train you, and then we'll come to audit you. If you put this in place, it can loads of most people already have something, especially for the big organizations, but our job is to come to review you. And if you've done that and done it appropriately, then you can have some kind of attestation of compliance. Yeah, pretty much that's it. I will take the questions now. These are I've already done these ones. We'll share the link on YouTube for these meetings that we already had. We'll also share the certificates, the link for you to take your foundation examination. All right, so thank you very much for everybody. I know I've taken a bit more time, but I just wanted to go through it. Now, these are so many questions. I'm not even sure I have the answer. I'm not even sure I have the answer to all these questions. But yes, there's a feedback form. Yeah, there's a feedback form, everybody. While I'm trying to quickly answer these questions, there's a feedback form at the bottom. Please just, it's a SurveyMonkey form. Just quickly do it. So let me see. Okay, also share the YouTube link again. Recently, I had an argument over using chairperson, which was translated as the wife of a chairman. So, well, most people just say chairman now, though. They don't bother saying chairperson, right? Chairman is chairman. I kind of know, right? But I think if the people feel a bit more comfortable with chairperson because it's a female, but I think in modern parlance, I think most people just say chairman, and whoever it is, whether it's male or female, I stand to be corrected, but yeah, a lot of people just say chairman. So I'll say in Ghana, we have several state boards taking fat salaries in state companies that are practically doing nothing. Do you want to indict me? I can't speak. The government of Ghana is my client, so I can't indict anybody. Who will set the KPI? Oh yeah, I think different people can set the KPI. Audits can set the KPI. Risk can set the KPI. Even the board, if you have a good company secretary, they can set the KPI. Our head of performance management, but yeah, compliance can set the KPI. Audit can set the KPI. The board secretary can set the KPI. The most important thing is that who is going to query the board. Thank you very much. That's the job of either internal audit or they bring an external person. Yeah. So I've seen where an organization adds that to, that's a good question. I've seen where an organization adds that responsibility to what the external auditors are going to do. They will query the board and they will audit. But I don't see a reason why the internal audit can also not audit the board. But if you feel uncomfortable, internal audit does not feel empowered enough, add it to the responsibility of one of your external auditors and they will look at it for you. You can also hire independent people like myself to look at it. But yeah, so, and there are KPIs for measuring board performance. I wish an NGO board was covered. This is one area I need insight. An NGO board is not very different. I mean, it's just that, so I've seen an NGO where the problem right now is that, the NGO also needs to be sustainable. And sometimes I've seen most NGOs right now also thinking about how they're going to generate revenue, especially when they cannot guarantee funding. So the way an NGO will work, they will also have their own board structure. I don't have a sample in this particular presentation, but they will also have their own board structure and they will have their own, should I say, subcommittees, depending on the area that, they think that is useful or necessary. And NGO is big, so you haven't said whether your NGO, which of the SDG goals you're trying to meet, whether it is poverty, or it is zero hunger, or it is good health, or it is education, and that will form the basis and the approach with which the board will be structured in an NGO. And I think, yeah, that also determine the kinds of people that you would need to bring in. But I know that NGOs are also running into problems these days simply because of funding, and without funding, they can't carry out their initiatives as it is. All right. Syndicate again says that NGOs, it's applicable to every type of organization. It doesn't specify anything. I just use some of those examples for illustration purposes, but it can be the ISO 37 is 1,000 is applicable to everybody, all entities, small, big, NGO, commercial, whatever it is. Dear, it is possible to get this seminar slide. Oh yeah, we'll share the slides with you, so it's not a problem at all. We will share the slides with you. We need the recorded version. We usually will just put the recorded version on YouTube, so we'll share the link. There's the link for some of the older ones that we have done on the social. Maureen, who drives this whole initiative, will share some of those things. Yes, we will share. I would also share the foundation exam. We'll share the foundation exam, right, for everybody that is logged in and has registered. All right, good. Thank you. Is this Professor? You do that thing. Prof, Prof, it's great to have you here. Yes, thank you very much, Ariola. Right, good. So everybody, I want only one thing from you right now. I just wanted to drop a comment in the chat room, your big takeaway. Just tell me, or maybe before I even say your own big takeaway, just tell me which of these principles you find to be the most, let me put this up. Which of these principles is the most interesting for you? That's how I'll know that you're here. Everybody, very quickly, I'll just put my slide up. I hope you can still see my slide, and I have the 11 principles. Everybody, please quickly, just put the principle that you find to the most interesting, and that's maybe something that you never did think was a huge principle when it comes to corporate governance. Everybody, please. That's what I want from you all. That's all I'm begging for. Just put the principle that you think is the most applicable, the most appropriate principle, that you find interesting in the chat room. You can take a screenshot to help you, right? You take a screenshot. So I'm going to go to the chat room, and I'm going to want to see everybody's comments. If you're here, there are about 60 people right now that are on the call. If you don't mind, can you see my screen? You can take a picture, you can take a screenshot. I'm going to go to the chat room, and I'm going to try to see what all of you are saying in terms of which of these principles you find to be the most interesting, most applicable. Well, I don't know what other word to use. All right, are we all good? All right. So once again, let me see. Right, good. Right. Completely, I agree. Data, the people who say data and decisions. Yeah. Thank you very much. I like that. Right, good. I agree. Data and decisions. Prof. Haha. Professor, I say that he's glad he shared the same class with me. He's my professor. Right, Prof. Thank you very much. Prof. Right. Right, everybody. Okay, good. Some people say data and decisions. Thank you very much, Madam Ariola Oguride. Yeah, everybody. Consider the broad scope, right? What's the chance of SME to? Oh, SME can actually. Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to call you Dr. Dapo. Dr. Dapo, yes, SMEs can actually. SMEs can. Somebody said the auditor will be sacked. Yeah, Dr. Dapo, yes, SMEs can. SMEs definitely can. All right. Risk part, yeah, data and decisions, board accountability, definitely data and decisions, risk governance, stakeholder engagement, accountability. Yeah, stakeholder risk governance. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Michael. Thank you. It's great that you're here. Viability and performance over time. Mr. Ayodele, thank you. Oversight. Eric, thank you. Risk governance. Dapo, yeah. Dapo, SMEs can. They need to develop a framework document, and they will just ensure that they align to a lot of these things. I can speak with you about this, about how certain, but they have to really be committed. It will take them some time, and to do it. But yes, SMEs can, and SMEs. Oh, Sakina, thank you very much. Sakina says point 11, and yeah. All right, people. Thank you very much, everyone. It's great having you all here. We've come to the end of this particular session. I might just do risk management next month because a lot of people have asked me about risk management. This was the plan for me for next month, was to do something on facility management. But I have had a lot of people talk about risk and people, especially now that there's a new version of MOR, which is version 4. I might just alter this and bring something specifically on risk management into this as it is maybe for next month, because a lot of people have talked about that. And I think that might just be useful for to all of us. So we'll share the invite for next month. We'll decide on the day. It might change from this particular date, but we'll let you all know. But yeah, this has been great. Once again, thank you very much for taking out of your break time on a busy Friday like this to be here. Thank you very much. God bless you all. And yeah, God bless you all. And I wish you all a beautiful August, so to speak. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thank you.